Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 27th episode of the Guilty Pleasures Podcast, the home of No Holds Barred podcasting. Now, on this podcast, we do not shy away from controversy. In fact, we attack it head on. Ben, we hit controversy with a Styles clash in honor of the great AJ Styles making his debut at the Royal Rumble, Ben.
And already more over than 95% of the current roster in WWE. Amazing.
That's true. That's true. I am your host, John DeMedio, a.k.a. Johnny D, and I am here with my amazing co-host, the incredibly talented yet not humble whatsoever, Benjamin Wolfgang. Ben, how are you doing, my friend?
That is a very true statement, John. I am doing well. We have survived the blizzard of 2016. I survived Carmageddon 2.0 here in Washington, D.C. last week. We'll talk more about the snowstorm and the end of humanity that we almost witnessed this past weekend a little bit later on. But I've dug myself out, John, and I'm doing well.
Oh, well, that's great to hear, Ben.
Yes.
The snow has certainly been a bitch, that's for sure. But to all of our listeners, we hope you stayed dry and safe during this snowstorm on the East Coast. And thank you, of course, for tuning in. We hope that you listened to my tweet or read my tweet and binge listened to the Guilty Pleasures podcast while you were able to do nothing when you were snowed in all weekend. But regardless, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, the 27th of the Guilty Pleasures podcast. We really appreciate all of your support. We are very excited for this episode. It's going to be a hell of an episode, Ben. We have a lot to talk about.
A lot to say, that's for damn sure.
Absolutely. So, to you, the listener, please get in touch with us. Let us know what you think about this episode and past episodes. You can reach us a few ways now. You can reach us on Twitter at the GP Podcast. That's the GP Podcast. You can reach us by email, theguiltypleasurespodcast at gmail.com. Or you can reach us on Facebook on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thegp podcast. So, Ben, anything you want to add here before we get rolling?
Just there's no excuse not to get in touch with us with all those ways. God knows. Even if you have to look us up in the phone book and call us or send us snail mail, there's no excuse. Let us know what you think of the show.
Absolutely. So, Ben, why don't you hop us into the Royal Rumble, which was a couple nights ago and a hell of an event.
Yeah, as we record this on Tuesday evening, the Royal Rumble, less than 48 hours old. And I think like most of the WWE universe, John, we had some pretty positive, reactions and feelings about the Royal Rumble. The event typically, it sort of sells itself. It's kind of like WrestleMania. The Royal Rumble match is just such an attraction and such an event that, unless they monumentally fuck something up, as they've done 2 years in a row leading into this year, it's usually a pretty good event. This year, I think there was a lot more good than bad, and we'll give our actual grades for the pay-per-view at the end. But for now, we're going to go match by match, give our grades for each of these matches, John. There weren't that many, of course, with the Royal Rumble matches. It's usually a pretty thin card, and that was the case here. We had a bunch of title matches, and then the Royal Rumble match itself. John, the card kicked off with the match that I was most excited for, other than the Royal Rumble itself, of course, and that was Dean Ambrose and Kevin Owens in the last man standing match for the IC title. Man, I'm just going to go right into it here, John. This match gets an A+ for me, and I know that's pretty rare for either of us to give an A+. It's, essentially the equivalent of our 5-star grade for a match, which is as high as you can go. We don't give it very often. I think this was the first time I've given an A+ since maybe the Undertaker Lesnar Hell in a Cell. I'm not even sure I gave that an A+. I can't remember. But this definitely gets an A+ for me for a couple of reasons. A, I've been excited about these two guys and their program since before Survivor Series when they had their first match, and I felt they hadn't really lived up to what they could do. These are two of the more talented guys in the ring in WWE, two of the more over guys. Ambrose, you could argue, is the most over babyface in the company, and Owens is, as we talked about off the air and we'll get into more tonight, is one of the few guys in professional wrestling, period, not even just WWE, who somehow is able to consistently, in 2016, in the age of smart fans and social media, get heel heat on himself. Right. And he did that to perfection in the Royal Rumble. So all of those things, the fact that it was a last man standing match, I was just jacked up for this match, and these two guys absolutely delivered. It felt personal when their previous matchups really hadn't. It felt like something was at stake, which it was, the IC title, and there were just some unbelievable spots involving chairs and involving ladders and tables. The ending of the match, John, with Owens going through the double-decker table was amazing. And look, you have to, as you know, when you have a last man standing match, you got to have a believable reason why one of these guys is actually going to stay down on the ground for a 10 count. So sometimes that's hard to do because, I know you were texting me during the match saying, look, these guys, Owens has taken a dirty deeds off a steel chair. He's, Ambrose is getting his ass kicked and they keep getting up. So you really have to find something interesting, and something different to justify why this guy's staying down for the 10 count. And I felt like they did that.
Right, Ben, really quickly. Yeah. They had Ambrose hit the dirty deeds. Mm-hmm. Then he hit the dirty deeds on a steel chair. Then he did a flying elbow off the top rope through a table. And Owens still got up. Just to reinforce your point.
Which might be a little bit of overkill, and we can talk about that later too. In fact, none of these moves seem to devastate anyone as much as they probably should. But nevertheless, I think the ending worked, because it was just good classic pro wrestling storytelling. They set up and teased the table spot earlier in the match and then came back to it and it played a role in the ending. So these guys get an A+ for me. They get an A+ also because they sold this match later on in the Royal Rumble, which we'll talk about more, and they both sold this the next night on Raw, which is kind of a lost art. I mean, how often we see guys that 15 minutes later, they seem like they're okay, whereas these guys actually, put the thought and the effort into selling the carnage of this match. So all in all, I really can't say a bad thing about this, except for maybe the fact that it overshadowed everything else in the card. But it gets an A+ from me, John, to open this show.
I completely agree with you, Ben. A lot of times we have grades that are very close to each other for the most part. You and I agree on a lot of things, but I gave this an A+ as well. And like you said, this might be my first A+ I've ever given. Look, this was the match of the night, and will probably end up being in the running for the match of the year.
For the second year in a row that we're going to have a match of the year contender coming out of the Royal Rumble right out of the gate.
Right, absolutely. And I thought the match of the year last year was the Royal Rumble triple threat between Lesnar, Cena, and Rollins. So certainly, at least in those two matches, they've certainly delivered. But yeah, I mean, what a performance from these two guys who probably had the best feud going over the last couple of months. Maybe Becky Lynch and Charlotte, but I think this one probably was. They have really restored the prestige and importance of the IC title in the process as well. Both Ambrose and Owens looked really strong in defeat, Ben, which is really tough to do, especially in this day and age. This match had so many amazing spots, and this was absolutely non-stop action. And so for that reason, it was an amazing way to kick off the pay-per-view, and it certainly set the tone for the rest of the night. But in terms of this feud in general, I hope it's ended because I think Owens needs to be elevated to the main event right now. I would certainly love to have Dean Ambrose there as well, but one of them has to keep the IC title. But Owens has had, one of the best years in a long time, one of the best debut years, maybe since Kurt Angle back in, I think, 1999 or something like that. So he certainly deserves it. Like you had said, Owens is one of the only guys that can actually get true heat. Being one of those cool heels, it doesn't matter for him. He still gets heat. So he deserves to be in the main event. One of them, definitely at WrestleMania, I believe. So I think this feud should end. This would be a fantastic way to have it end. This match felt like the finale of the feud. Because they let it all hang out. They had these amazing spots. It was extremely physical and passionate. And all of those things just popped off the screen to me, Ben. So that's why this match got an A+. The expectations were there, but it certainly delivered on those, no doubt about it.
And just briefly before you move on here, I'll just say that it's ironic to me as well that I think this was more violent and a better tables, ladders, and chairs match, quote unquote, if you will, than anything at the tables, ladders, and chairs pay-per-view a month before. So that's interesting.
Right? Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Maybe they shouldn't have these gimmick pay-per-views.
Right, because this one felt different than everything else in the card. There's a reason. You have one or maybe two of these matches in a pay-per-view, and they feel more special. rather than seeing the same spot 6 times throughout the night in every single match.
Absolutely, and this happened organically.
Right.
They needed a last man standing match to end this feud, or to have this feud culminate. A lot of times at the TLC pay-per-view and things like that, it's the first match between two guys, and they have this Extreme Rules type of match. That doesn't really work. So WWE nailed it here. Everything was perfect. A+ for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But Ben, moving on to the second match of the pay-per-view, which certainly was not as good as the first one, although that's
tough to follow.
It certainly is. This was the New Day facing the Usos for the tag team titles, and the New Day won this match, Ben. They retained the championships. Look, I mean, I'm going to say something really brief here, Ben. I don't have a lot to say about this match, and then I'll let you take it. I gave this a C-. I think that might be a little generous on my part, but I'm in a good mood because the pay-per-view is fantastic. But look, man, we've seen this match happen so many times since the Usos have returned, so the match didn't feel special at all.
Right.
The build wasn't great for this match, which didn't help, and the Usos are a tired act at this point. So it was almost impossible for me to get emotionally invested in this match. It's just that simple. The match was pretty average in the ring, and it didn't have any incredible spots or anything like that. And it felt like a match that was suited for Monday Night Raw or SmackDown, not a pay-per-view, especially the second biggest one of the year in the Royal Rumble. So overall, this was probably my least favorite match of the night, or second to least. We have another one coming up that I really hated. This was just average all around. And, I think it didn't help either that the crowd, came off that high that they experienced in the first match to come back to this one. So overall, just not great and relatively predictable. I'll give it a C-.
Yeah, I'll be a little more generous than you. I'll give it a C. I mean, it wasn't offensive, but I'm just sick of seeing these two teams fight each other, to be quite honest with you. And I get that WWE's tag team division right now is really in dire straits. There just aren't a lot of teams that are believable contenders for the World Tag Team Championship. So I understand why you want to put them together on a marquee pay-per-view like this. But look, John, since the Usos came back a few months ago, I think you mentioned this last week, that something's been missing.
Yeah.
They haven't been exactly the same as they used to be. In fact, they kind of don't even seem over with the crowd at this point, to me, to be honest with you. There's kind of a lackadaisical reaction from the crowd. They at least used to get a pop from kids and families who were the same, people that cheer John Cena. Seem kind of like the Usos. They're kind of a kid-friendly, fun-loving act, I guess, if you will, high-flying. But something's been off about them. They just don't have any depth of character whatsoever. And so to me, they just, in that respect, in terms of charisma and character and just interesting, people on the show to watch, they just pale in comparison to the New Day. And I think that was just blatantly obvious here. I'll give it a C because I liked the booking, which is a familiar theme. I think, they certainly had their missteps here, but I think by and large, the right people went over in pretty much every match on the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. So I got to give them credit for keeping the belts on the New Day. You've invested so much time in these guys, gotten them so over as heels, that I think at this point they deserve to go to WrestleMania and defend the tag team championships there. Now, I don't know who that would be against at this point, to be honest with you, unless you pull a team up from NXT or put two guys together or something. But all in all, the booking was right. The match was what it was. I'm sick of seeing these two guys. We'll get into Raw later. I was disappointed to see the Usos again. Clash with the New Day, because I was hoping, much like Ambrose and Owens, that this was kind of the end of this feud, because it's run its course. It probably ran its course a month ago, to be honest with you. So, I'll give it a C, but not a whole lot to say about this. The Usos, I'm not sure what you do with them, if you repackage them in some way or give them some sort of edge to the character. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know we'll get into Raw later, but it just seems like it's time for some sort of update in terms of the Usos, because they're just going nowhere fast right now, in my opinion.
I don't have a solution for this, Ben. They seem to be falling into the John Cena category, where it's just like, you think that their characters probably aren't going to change. because the WWE is happy with the way they do things, and that they are huge sellers to the younger crowd, as you had mentioned. So I don't think the WWE will probably feel the urgency to change them up or repackage them, maybe that you and I feel. So I don't think that they will really change. But getting back to the New Day and who they could face, I really think they need to call up Enzo and Cass and have them face the New Day at WrestleMania, because the promos that would go back and forth between those two teams would be incredible. And you have the New Day, which is supposed to be a heel tag team, but they've been getting cheered a lot recently for good reason. But if you bring up Enzo and Cass, they are the ultimate face tag team. Everyone loves them. So you might actually be able to get some heat on the New Day by having such a over face act, or what we think they will be, in Enzo and Cass. So I think that's what they need to do. And let's remember, Ben, and we'll get into this another time, but NXT, the main point of it, or what it was supposed to be, is to aid in developing guys for the main roster. It's not about keeping guys on NXT to make that program better. So you and I agree, the tag team division is total shit right now. So why not bring up tag teams from NXT? This is the time to do it. That's what it's there for. They 100% need to do that right now.
They do, because I'm hard pressed to even think of more than 3 or 4 tag teams on the main roster right now, to be honest with you. So it's not a good situation for the tag division. And that's a shame, because the New Day, they have a lot of credibility now with the belts. They've had them for a while. They're over. They're not over as heels necessarily, as you mentioned, but they're over. That's for damn sure. So you could have a marquee tag match at WrestleMania for the belts if you found an opponent. I think Enzo and Cass might be the way to go there, John. Moving on to our next match for the U.S. title, Kalisto versus Alberto Del Rio. These guys have bounced the belt back and forth a couple of times in the weeks leading up to the Royal Rumble. John, I'm going to give this a B-. It was pretty good. I don't think it was as good as their match on Raw, where Kalisto won the belt from Del Rio. I'm not even sure it was as good as their match on SmackDown, the rematch that they had. But, I mean, it was good. It was passable. I'm a Kalisto fan. I think he's entertaining as hell to watch in the ring. Del Rio, speaking of guys who have been missing something since they've come back, something for me just has not clicked with Del Rio since he came back a few months ago either. I'm not sure what it is, but he just kind of seems like a fish out of water sometimes. But these guys put on an acceptable match. Yet another example of the League of Nations just getting completely shit on all the time, on every pay-per-view, every episode of Raw, every episode of SmackDown. This stable's become a complete joke. We'll get into more of that later with Rusev's, 45 seconds that he lasted or so in the Royal Rumble match. I mean, just a complete joke. So, not surprised that Del Rio lost this match. I'm pulling for the Kalisto versus Neville for the U.S. title match at WrestleMania. They're both baby faces. They might both get cheer, but I think that to me is the kind of WrestleMania match WWE likes to put out. High-flying, incredibly entertaining. So I think there's a future for Kalisto. I'm fine with him getting the U.S. belt, but this one to me didn't quite live up to the expectations and kind of fell a little bit short of their previous matches. But hey, congratulations to Kalisto. We talk about them not wanting to pull the trigger and actually get behind a younger guy and, actually strap the rocket boosters to him and push the fuck out of him. It seems like they might be doing that with Kalisto here, so I can't fault them for that. I think it was the right booking decision. Again, I think the right guy went over here. So I'll give it a B-, even if the in-ring work didn't quite live up to what I think these two guys theoretically should be able to do together.
Yeah, you said a lot of the things I was thinking, Ben, so I won't repeat them. I gave this a C+, so I'm right around what you graded it out as. Look, it was a decent match overall, but like the New Day versus the Usos, Ben, this match didn't seem special to me because they have fought a lot over the past month, and they have traded the title back and forth a few times in such a short period of time. So that takes away a lot from this feud, and I think from this match overall. But hopefully both of these guys move on from this feud and each other, because I don't see how WWE Creative can keep us interested in this feud anymore. And look, let's face it. I mean, Kalisto going over Del Rio again, if they keep doing this, that's not going to do anything for him and his character. No. So if they want to build Kalisto up to be a even bigger star than he is right now, they need to have him go against someone else and have another big win for him, as opposed to just keep keep on going against Del Rio when we've seen it a bunch already, and it's already stale, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's for damn sure. So moving on to the next match, Ben, and this is one I really want to talk about.
Oh, boy.
Because I had a big problem with this match, my friend. This was for the Divas Championship. It was Charlotte versus Becky Lynch, your crush.
Yes.
Charlotte wins here after Ric Flair interfered in the match. Ben, I gave this a D+. A D+. So my lowest grade so far, and that is my lowest grade for the entire pay-per-view. Look, man, the ending was horrible with Ric Flair helping Charlotte to win. It really was. And we've seen this time and time again over the last couple of months during this feud. So that was very disappointing to me. I think they booked this wrong as well because Becky Lynch had the most momentum of any diva up to this point, and Charlotte's title run has just become very stale to me. And I don't know if a lot of people feel that way, but Charlotte as a face or as a heel just isn't doing it much for me right now. And she has held the title for a very long time. I think it's around like 150 days or something close to that. So she's been champion for a really long time. And for that reason, I think Becky Lynch should have won the title here. On last week's episode, I predicted that Becky Lynch would go over because I think that was the right booking decision. But God forbid, I trusted the WWE to do something right here. So Becky should have won this. I think they made the bad decision with Charlotte. And one other thing, I want to get back to them in the ring really quickly. Because Charlotte and Becky haven't had an amazing matchup to this point in the ring. And more broadly, we haven't seen Charlotte have one good match since she's come up to the main roster. I keep waiting for it, Ben. I keep waiting for it, but it never seems to happen. And so, that's another reason why I think Charlotte needs to drop this title soon and kind of needs to reevaluate either her character or her in-ring work or something, because I don't think she's working extremely well right now. I don't think she's tapping into her potential is really, I think, the main thing, because she is genetically superior, as she says in her promos and all that, and it's true. And so I think she's capable of a lot more. But I gave this a D+ because I just fucking hated it overall. I hated the ending. I thought the match was eh. But the only good thing about this match, Ben, was the end. And I know you're probably going to talk about this a lot. When Sasha Banks came out and attacked both Becky Lynch and Charlotte and stood tall in the middle of the ring with the title. So finally, thank fucking God, Sasha Banks is in the title picture, or at least we hope. But hopefully not at the expense of Becky Lynch,
right,
who has earned a spot in the title picture for the foreseeable future for the job that she's done over the last couple months. So Ben, I want to hear your thoughts on this match in general, and then definitely your thoughts on Sasha and what happened at the end of the match.
Sure. I mean, a couple of things here. I agree with everything you said about Charlotte. I gave this a C-. I'll be a little more generous than you. The end was an abomination with Ric Flair and the jacket toss. But I will say that Ric Flair also provided probably my favorite moment of the match earlier when he kissed Becky Lynch out of nowhere.
That's right.
On the outside. And that was hilarious and classic Ric Flair. I saw some people on Twitter saying that it was a little bit creepy and they felt a sexual assault vibe from Ric Flair. I didn't get that. I just thought it was Ric Flair being Ric Flair. That's what he's been doing for 35, 40 years.
People
so
are too fucking sensitive, Ben. Really.
That was great, and that made me laugh. I think people are a little too sensitive to that sort of thing on occasion. So that was great, but I really can't think of anything else that kind of popped, out of this match to me anyway, John. There were some blown spots, so the in-ring work wasn't great, as you mentioned. Charlotte, for whatever reason, just has not been the same that she was in NXT, so I can't put my finger on exactly why that is. She feels the pressure or whatever the case may be. But the match itself was plotting and not that great, and the ending was just complete horseshit, in my opinion. I don't understand why. I mean, Charlotte should have been disqualified for Ric Flair throwing the jacket in, so that didn't make any sense. Right. But then even aside from that, that's just a terrible ending and makes Becky Lynch, and Charlotte really for that matter, just look terrible. The end, with Sasha Banks coming out, I thought was fantastic. She got a huge pop. I don't know if she's playing some sort of tweener character now, because she, of course, attacked Becky Lynch, right off the bat, and then went and attacked Charlotte, which got her huge babyface pop. So I'm not sure if she's going to kind of straddle the middle, and maybe you have Charlotte as the heel and Becky as the pure baby face, and you're going to do, into a three-way match either at Fastlane, or maybe they can somehow hold off until WrestleMania and do that. So, but that, I think, was the right move. I was glad to see that she came out by herself without Team Bad. I think maybe they're finally realizing that she's, big enough of a star, and she's over enough already that she can carry this on her own and get into the Divas title picture without having to be associated with Tamina and Naomi. Yes. So that's good. I'm hoping that WWE has finally come to their senses on that. We've talked about the teams and our disdain for them many times before on this show. But I think my main concern, a couple main concerns coming out of the match, John, just kind of looking forward, is are we going to see the Charlotte that we saw in NXT at some point on the main roster in terms of match quality? I actually like her character overall. They rely a little bit too much on Ric Flair, but I think that it's getting her over as a heel. She got some legitimate heel heat in this match. That's for damn sure. So I think that's good, but I hope that she can turn it up in terms of match quality. My other concern is, and you mentioned this, John, in your comments, that I hope Becky Lynch doesn't just get completely thrown out now of the main event picture in favor of Sasha Banks. Right. Becky Lynch is a pure babyface. There aren't many pure babyfaces, if any, really, in the Divas division, as we've talked about. She is one, and she's over as a babyface, both with younger fans. They have the goggles they can market. She's over with older fans. She's over with 31-year-old males who live in Washington, D.C., who are hopelessly in love with her. She's over with everybody who watches WWE. So I think, and she's earned the right, I think, to be in the main event picture. I think even if you do have Sasha Banks in the match, a Becky Lynch win at WrestleMania, for example, and a triple threat, finally getting the belt, would be a huge pop and a huge feel-good moment for everybody. So I hope that WWE, and we've talked about this many times before. We had Larry Zonka from 411 Mania on last week, and he said the same thing, that for whatever reason, they can only seem to focus on one storyline with one or two divas at one time. So can they effectively have a storyline that incorporates Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha Banks for the Divas Championship all at one time? I don't know. I kind of doubt they can, but I think that's probably the best way they can go forward from here, John.
Yeah, and I think that's why Becky Lynch needed to win this match, because now the WWE set themselves up where you're going to have Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks probably in the same match with Charlotte. So only one of them can win the title. And it's very possible that whoever doesn't win the title is going to lose momentum. Mm-hmm. I don't think Becky Lynch could be any more over than she is right now. I just don't. And so if she doesn't win the title, that is a gigantic missed opportunity by the WWE, because she's going to fall down a little bit. But at the same time, you're finally pushing Sasha Banks, at least it appears that way. So this would be a great time to have her get the title as well. So, man, I don't know. It's certainly tough. But I do think, I know you said, a Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch feud or something like that might be good. But the issue with that is partially why Becky Lynch has gotten over so much is because Charlotte has done a pretty decent job of being heel.
Right.
But Sasha Banks is getting cheered constantly. So even though she's a quote-unquote heel, she's getting reactions as if she's a face. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have face versus face, two people that are so over in Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks. I don't know if that's really going to work extremely well. So that's why I think WWE really fucked up here by not putting the belt on Becky Lynch.
That's a good point. Because you would have had just sort of a ready-made storyline. Charlotte needs a rematch. Sasha's back in the picture. Becky Lynch keeps her momentum by winning the belt. So yeah,
and that would have been an easy way. It would have been an easy way to get Charlotte out of the title picture temporarily, because all she would have to go on is, this is my rematch, and then have her lose that, and then she's out of the title picture. But now, because she has the title, she's at least in the title picture for two more matches. Because even if she loses it in her next match, then she has a rematch again. So now, so she's not going to go away for a little while now, for sure.
Right. That's true. John, it's time to move on out of the main event, the Royal Rumble match, and there are a number of different aspects and developments here that we're going to want to touch on.
A ton.
The AJ Styles debut, of course, was a big deal. We'll get more into that later, and we'll talk more about him later in the show as well. Swipe right, swipe left. Spoiler alert. Keep you waiting for that one. But look, I want to talk about. I'm going to skip right to the end here, John. I'm giving this match an A. The Royal Rumble match itself. I think all in all, the action was great. There were some surprises like AJ Styles. That was nice to see. Some surprises like Sami Zayn coming back. That was nice to see. But I think the reason that I'm giving this an A and that I will look back on this Royal Rumble fondly for years to come is at the end with Triple H coming out as a surprise entrant, John, at number 30, eliminating Roman Reigns, which guarantees us a new champion, and being in the final two with my favorite man, Dean Ambrose. Look, I mean, I was standing up, John, pacing back and forth across my living room. I felt like 6 years old, marking out when it came down, because I knew in my head, look, Dean Ambrose probably isn't going to win. I get the booking of putting the belt on Triple H going into WrestleMania, but, as any good storytelling should do, and as professional wrestling does, when it's at its best, it creates that little bit of doubt in your mind, a little bit of hope, in this case, that, oh my God, is it possible my favorite babyface might actually beat the big, disgusting, dastardly heel in Triple H and come out of this with the World Championship. So, I was freaking out for those few minutes at the end of the Royal Rumble. So that, to me, was a huge success. If they can get somebody like me, who's about as jaded as they come when it comes to WWE and professional wrestling in general, to actually get excited about the end of the match, that's a big victory. I think the booking team needs to be applauded for that. Now, there, of course, Gino Morosco, our good friend at CageSideSeats.com, reported today that was an audible called by Triple H in the ring because of the negative reaction that Roman Reigns had gotten. That initially the plan was to have Reigns versus Triple H as the final two, but that they realized that the fans would probably cheer for Triple H and boo the shit out of Reigns again at the Royal Rumble. And so they made the decision, correctly so, I got to give Triple H credit for that he realized he would get heel heat if it was Triple H versus Dean Ambrose. So that's good thinking.
Yeah, really quickly, Ben, I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you think that it's possible that not only was that audible called, but because of that, do you think that maybe the WWE was going into this having Roman Reigns win against Triple H? I think that's possible, and then once they heard the boos, they were like, fuck it, you're going to lose.
I wouldn't be surprised, because you can't imagine a scenario where it comes down to Reigns versus Triple H, and Triple H eliminates Reigns clean. I mean, then it's kind of like Reigns has nothing to bitch about, kind of. You know what I mean, at that point.
Right.
Sort of like he lost to Triple H, not fair and square. He'd gotten beaten down, of course, earlier in the match by the League of Nations and by, other people. But still, that seemed like that would have been a strange ending. So, yes, I think maybe that the idea was actually to have Reigns win and retain the championship, and they called it complete audible. But look, the audible worked, in my opinion. It made everything more interesting coming out of that, and it gave me some excitement, that's for sure, to see Dean Ambrose, who has a ton of momentum coming out of the Royal Rumble with his win over Owens. He stayed in the Rumble match for 30 minutes despite looking like he had just gotten run over by a truck. So I'm pleased to see that Ambrose has some serious fire now underneath him. And John, we'll get into, again, some more of these storylines coming out of the Rumble. But what did you make sort of the end of the overall booking of the way that Triple H came out at number 30 and won? And was it the right move to call that audible and have it be Ambrose and Triple H at the end?
Yeah, it was absolutely the right move. There's no question about it, for all the reasons that you stated, 100%. Ben, I'm going to kind of attack like all the storylines here and all the things from the match, and then you can kind of tell me what you think about these and give your own opinions here. But I'm going to give this an A- for the match itself. I thought it was great, but there were a few things that really bothered me, which prevented this from being an A+ or an A. But Ben, I'm going to start with the positives from this match. Okay, this was by far the best Royal Rumble match of the last few years.
Oh, no question.
Especially after the massive failures that were the past two Royal Rumbles. Like you had said, I was actually standing up for the entire duration of this match. And so that's how into it I was. That's how excited I was for this. AJ Styles made his debut at number 3, and I totally marked out when his music hit. which, by the way,
Theme music.
you and I talked about this. The theme music is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that they spent the time to give him a original, cool theme for theme music. For guys that they might not have a plan of pushing, they wouldn't do that. So I think that's a good sign for his future. But anyway, was so happy about AJ Styles. Along with Dean Ambrose, Styles was by far the most over guy in the Rumble.
No question.
Which was great. But I thought unfortunately, they made a mistake here by having him be eliminated too soon, and not having him get any really legitimate offensive moves in. Ben, I mean, really, I had texted you. He got like 2 kicks in, and that's pretty much it. We didn't get to see the things that make AJ Styles.
Well, just real quickly, Jonathan, but it was sort of, I mean, I liked bringing him in at number 3 because it gave it, a surprise and kind of a shock right off the bat of the Rumble. But on the other hand, I wonder if it was poor booking, and maybe you should have saved him for 7 or 8. Because, look, Rusev got tossed immediately. It was Reigns versus Styles. And as you said to me after the pay-per-view ended, you're not going to have Styles go over on Reigns in terms of getting offense in the middle of the Royal Rumble. So maybe you wait until there are some jobbers in the ring that he can just run wild on.
Right, because everyone or most guys, when they come in after their entrance, they usually get a flurry of 20 seconds of incredible offense in. Because they're the fresh guy. Maybe they do a finisher or 2 or some signature moves. He didn't get to do any of that, which I thought hurt, but still, whatever, fucking awesome. Having Sami Zayn as an entrant was an awesome surprise. Him going at it with Owens was fucking fantastic. Mm-hmm. But I thought Zayn could have lasted longer than he did as well, which sucked. But overall, I think they did a great job with the 30 entrants they selected. I thought they did a very good job with that. In regards to Triple H coming in at 30 was a fantastic move.
Yeah.
And I think with the current landscape of the WWE, he was the right guy to have win, maybe along with Bray Wyatt, who I thought would have been a good choice as well. But, Ben, you and I talked about this, but having Triple H eliminate Roman Reigns before Dean Ambrose was 100% the right move.
Yeah, you had to.
Absolutely, because of basically, they would have been cheering for the mega heel, who is Triple H. So that was a great move if they had been the final 2. So those were the good things that I really liked that they did. But here are the things that I had a fucking problem with, Ben. And I know you hated this too. So, you can hop in with your reaction on this if you want. Having Reigns go to the back for 25 minutes because of the attack on him by the League of Nations was absolutely fucking horrible.
Yeah.
And it made the fans boo Roman Reigns even more, which had him looking more weak than it did looking strong. So that totally bit the WWE in the ass and made Roman Reigns, to the casual fan and the hardcore fans, look absolutely horrible. I mean, what were your thoughts on that specifically?
Well, I was just going to say there are times when that works, when the stretcher job thing works, like Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30. I thought that worked. And he came back into the match. The fans were on his side. This didn't work because the majority of smart fans, and I think the crowd in Orlando certainly was majority smart fans, judging by the reactions to different guys throughout the night, they know that Reigns is not capable of working a 25-plus minute match right now. I mean, he's not Seth Rollins or John Cena or Daniel Bryan or Dolph Ziggler or somebody who can go out there and just put on a clinic for a half an hour or more. Even in a Royal Rumble match where you're able to lie in the corner for 5 minutes or more whenever you have to, which was just puzzling to me.
Yeah.
You're trying to get the guy over, keep him in the match, have him, he's beat down in the corner, he can't get up, whatever the case may be, but don't take him out of the match for a half hour because the fans are saying, well, I think they're able to put 2 and 2 together at that point, that he's just not able to go for that long. And then his return, when he took out Sheamus with the Superman punch. I mean, how many times are we going to see that? So I think, I had a huge problem with that. It makes Reigns look bad. And look, to anybody who says that, you can't expect a guy to come in at number 1 and work the entire match, that's complete bullshit because we've seen it done many times before. We've seen Rey Mysterio do it, Shawn Michaels do it, Chris Benoit do it. They're all fantastic workers. But look, we saw Chris Jericho come in at number 6 and last until the very end of this match. He was in for about 50 minutes or close to it in this match, and he's well, I think 50 years old or pushing 50 years old, and not in the greatest shape of his career, but he was able to survive and last that long. So that's just a bad look for Reigns, John, all across the board.
It is, and I think the Royal Rumble match itself was maybe a little bit over an hour long. So Jericho only wasn't in the match for maybe 10 minutes.
Right.
So that just, that's exactly.
If he can do it, there's no excuse for Reigns.
Exactly. And really quickly,
I'm not asking him to have an Iron Man match against Bret Hart.
Right.
But in a Royal Rumble match, there's no excuse. You can take as many breaks as you need to.
Right. And you mentioned Daniel Bryan and when he was stretchered out in that moment. Daniel Bryan, if you remember, he didn't get stretchered to the back. They tried to put him on the stretcher, and then he got off and went back into the ring, which made him look badass. It made him look tough. Reigns fucked up because he actually went into the back.
Right. And he got up, but then walked to the back.
Right, exactly. It looked like that he didn't have any heart. He didn't have any guts. So you're right. The stretcher thing certainly can work, but the way they executed it was horrible, and they did it the wrong way. And you would think that after Daniel Bryan only 2 years ago, that they would have remembered how to actually do it.
Right.
So that was horrible, really bad, poorly done on WWE's part. And Ben, really quickly, and I want you to get your thoughts on this as well. The other main problem I had was the fact that Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman came back into the ring and eliminated Brock Lesnar after the three of them had been eliminated themselves.
Right.
It makes no sense, Ben, because you can't be eliminated by someone who has already been eliminated. It's just that simple, Ben. And this was a gigantic and a glaring hole that the WWE just totally missed.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that blew my mind. And speaking of things that didn't make sense, why didn't the Wyatt family stay at ringside while Bray Wyatt was still in the Royal Rumble after they eliminated Lesnar to help him win?
Right.
We already know that there's no DQ. And why didn't Roman Reigns stay out there after Triple H eliminated him to help his quote-unquote friend, Dean Ambrose, win the Rumble?
Because Roman Reigns is the worst friend ever, which we'll be detailing more in an article soon for CageSideSeats.com. Look, I had two major problems with this. One was what you mentioned. That's a hole in logic that's big enough to drive a tractor trailer through. That you have these three guys get eliminated by Lesnar, and then they come back in, eliminate Lesnar, and then just walk to the back, as opposed to just staying in the match and continuing to help Bray Wyatt win, because nobody's going to stop them at that point. You just proved they can do whatever they want. So that makes absolutely no sense. My second problem, John, was that Lesnar's reaction to this was decidedly un-Lesnar-like. Yes. I've never seen Lesnar. I mean, look, we've seen Lesnar get screwed multiple times. We saw him get screwed at WrestleMania by Seth Rollins. We saw him get screwed by The Undertaker. In both of those instances, he's come back like a man possessed the next night on Raw or later that night or whatever the case may be, just tearing shit apart, going after people, fighting in the back, giving F5s to Michael Cole. He got eliminated here and just casually walked to the back, which I didn't understand. And then, I mean, Dolph Ziggler was coming down the ramp at that moment, so I was waiting for Lesnar to just attack Ziggler and give him an F5 on the floor or something like that, just to take out his frustrations, or at the very least, and we'll get into Raw more in a minute, come back on Raw and demand to fight the Wyatts or start tearing shit up again, and he wasn't even on the show. So the Lesnar, I don't really understand. That just kind of was sort of anti-Lesnar in terms of character development. So I get that you're trying to keep the heat on the Wyatts right now, and on Bray Wyatt in particular, if you're going to build this feud. But, you know, that was not the Brock Lesnar that I've come to know and love. So, yeah, I had a big problem with that as well.
Yeah, and Brock Lesnar in general, he's looked like a bitch the last few weeks. Because if you remember on Monday Night Raw before the Rumble, Paul Heyman said, you know, my client shouldn't have to go into the Rumble, blah, blah, blah. The authority said, yep, you're going in, and they didn't make a stink about it whatsoever. So that was completely un-Lesnar and Paul Heyman-like. And then, like you said, they have this happen at the Royal Rumble, where he didn't even seem really upset that he got eliminated in Brock Lesnar or didn't go off on anyone. So it's been back-to-back times that we've seen Brock Lesnar. He has looked not Brock Lesnar-ish. Mm-hmm. He hasn't looked like himself. And so, I don't know maybe if they're ignoring this or they're not putting as much emphasis on Brock Lesnar in general, but this is bad, man, because that's the shit that made Brock Lesnar awesome. And if you have him stop doing that, the fans aren't going to be behind him as much, and you're going to potentially start losing all the amazing momentum that Brock Lesnar has had since WrestleMania 30. So they really need to be careful about that. It'll be interesting to see how he acts and how Paul Heyman acts the next time that we see them. And here's a little segue for you, Ben. They were not on this episode of Monday Night Raw. Which
It's mind-blowing to me.
I couldn't believe. Because, look, there were so many holes in the booking of the Royal Rumble match that we just alluded to that you would have thought that there would have been this really compelling follow-up to all of these holes on Monday Night Raw. Yet they completely fucked it up, and somehow they managed to ignore all of these things. And, it's funny, Ben, you and I were talking about this, and I said that it was borderline impossible for WWE to fuck up Monday Night Raw after how good the Royal Rumble was, and after all of the storylines that could emulate from the Royal Rumble match itself, plus all the other matches on the card. I thought it was impossible, yet they fucked it up royally, and they actually managed to not really address anything that happened in the Royal Rumble match for the most part, which is absolutely absurd. They missed the ball massively here. A terrible job on their part. So you can see how I felt about fucking Monday Night Raw. So let's get into Raw, man. I mean, what were your thoughts overall on Monday Night Raw, Ben? Because, I have a lot to say here. Because, like I said, I was furious last night. You and I were in such a good mood following the Royal Rumble. We felt amazing. We thought maybe the product turned a corner. We were really excited for Monday Night Raw. Probably the most excited we've been since the Raw after WrestleMania. And it was just a gigantic letdown. So what were your overall thoughts on Raw?
Look, just disappointing and frankly, boring, I think, is the problem. And that's exactly what you don't want coming out of a major pay-per-view like this. You want to maintain that level of excitement if you can, and they were just unable to do that. Look, there are a litany of problems here, and I'll keep this a little bit brief because I know you have a lot to say about this. You can just tick them off one after the other. The lack of Lesnar being on the show is a complete failure. The Wyatt family not even addressing Brock Lesnar whatsoever. Just a complete failure. The Rock's return, as entertaining as it might be, was a 20-minute waste of my time and didn't really do anything to advance an angle. It was just him giving a promo for WrestleMania. I thought, look, the main event, you can say what you want about the main event, and if you haven't heard, the main event of Fastlane is going to be Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar versus Dean Ambrose in a triple threat for the number one contender to face Triple H at WrestleMania. Lesnar, I don't know. Lesnar wasn't even on the show. I thought the whole idea of this triple threat was to impress the Authority to get into that match. Lesnar's not even there. Heyman's not even there. And somehow he gets put into the match to begin with. And speaking of storyline holes to drive a truck through, why is the Authority even putting Reigns in this match to begin with if their only objective is to screw him and keep him out of the world title picture? That just makes no sense. He didn't do anything last night in a tag match with Dean Ambrose against the League of Nations to justify being put back into this match. So you had all of those things, and then I know your favorite segment and mine, the social outcast Bo Dallas going up against Flo Rida in a rap battle that Bo Dallas unquestionably won. I will just say this for the record. We tweeted this out last night that it was a complete domination by Bo Dallas over Flo. His raps were nerdy but funny, whereas Flo Rida's raps were just absolutely awful. So that was a huge miscalculation on WWE's part. Makes me wonder if Bo Dallas maybe should be rebranded in some way or another. But look, all in all, just an uneventful episode to Monday Night Raw. They teased the big return. Everybody knew who the big return was. We wanted to see Lesnar. We didn't. And we once again got Dean Ambrose, who is over as fuck, being little buddy to Roman Reigns, as he always seems to be. The one major positive, a couple things. We got a good match out of Chris Jericho and AJ Styles. Good booking there with AJ Styles going over. And number two, and I mentioned this earlier, Owens and Ambrose both were still selling the fuck out of the last man standing match on Monday Night Raw. So they deserve, massive kudos for that. Nobody does that anymore. And that just kind of solidified, if you already didn't think that was a great match, which I did, but if you didn't, that just kind of solidifies it in your head that, man, those two guys went through a war and just beat the absolute piss out of each other, because here we are 24 hours later, and Kevin Owens is still limping when he comes down to the ring, and Owens is still bandaged up, or Ambrose is still bandaged up and looks like shit from the match before. So credit to both of those guys for that. But all in all, John, I mean, this is a C- to D territory episode of Raw for me.
It's funny. I gave this a D-, man. And I honestly think that's being a little bit generous for my expectations of Monday Night Raw. I want to mention one thing really quickly before I break this down. The thing about Flo Rida and Bo Dallas, how the fuck did Flo Rida lose, first of all, and have a horrible rap battle when it's not like he had to freestyle, Ben? It's not like he got up there and didn't know what they were going to do, that he didn't know what the storyline was going to be. It's like he probably had at least a little bit of time to prepare something, and that's what he fucking came up with? A guy who is world famous, a platinum selling artist, that's what the fuck he did? I mean, my God. I mean, that was absolutely embarrassing, and I don't understand it. I really don't. I couldn't believe that was happening.
Unless he's just unable to rap in a PG environment. Maybe that's just the only thing that I can think of.
I'm sorry, man. I can't buy that. Like, that's ridiculous. There's so many things you could say about the Social Outcasts. It's not like they don't give him any material. He had a softball served up to him, and he fucking whiffed. It was absolutely embarrassing. But one quick thing I want to talk about before I get into the specifics. You and I read articles sometimes. Gino Morasco, Larry Zonka have been on the show. Great columnists for very big wrestling websites. They seem to give this Monday Night Raw an average grade. And I don't understand it. I really don't get it. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how you couldn't think that this Raw was an epic failure on all levels. I was stunned to see that, and you know we both respect them a lot. But this wasn't just those two. It seemed to be the general thought across the internet that this was an okay Raw. I don't fucking understand it. And here's why, buddy. I mean, let me get into this. I'm gonna prepare here and try not to get super fucking angry. Why didn't Roman Reigns come out, Ben, and interrupt the Authority at the beginning of the show?
Because he never does. He's too cool, calm, and collected all the time.
He could have said something like, "You made me have to go out there and run through 29 other men, and you know I was attacked by the League of Nations outside the ring because Triple H, you are afraid to face me one-on-one because you know I'll kick your ass just like I did at TLC."
Right.
That's what he should have come out and said, because that's what the reaction would have been of anyone in that position who just lost the World Heavyweight Championship.
Of a normal human being, yeah.
He didn't address that at all. He didn't address if he was upset or not about losing. He just didn't give a shit. It's incredibly frustrating. He should have demanded a title shot at the beginning of Raw. And with Roman Reigns, now they're having him, you touched on this a little bit, Ben. Now they're having him face the two most over guys in the company. Right. Dean Ambrose and Brock Lesnar at Fastlane.
They wonder what reaction he's going to get at Fastlane from the fans.
Do they think that that's going to go any better, Ben?
No.
He's going to get the shit booed out of him. And they keep putting this guy in a position to fail and to not get over. It's insane. Look, this match is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But they really fucked up if their goal is to get the fans behind Roman Reigns heading into WrestleMania, where we can almost guarantee that he's going to be facing Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship, or that's at least what we think is going to happen right now. But I was saying this to you before we went on the air. The only way that this could work is if the WWE is finally going to listen to everyone in the entire world, Ben, and finally turn Roman Reigns heel. And what better way to do it than to do it against the two most over baby faces in the company right now? That would get him the most heat and absolutely would be best for business. I mean, what do you think about a potential heel turn here?
I of course am fully on board with the idea of Reigns turning heel. I guess I just wonder how exactly you would see that playing out into WrestleMania. Does he turn heel and win the match, and then you would have a heel Reigns against Triple H? How does that play out exactly?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I think maybe you have maybe you make. I mean, I know you don't like this, Ben. Sometimes to have so many triple threat matches and things like that, but maybe you have
Ambrose
a triple threat match. Yeah, and then if you put in a Brock Lesnar, you can kind of make it as like Triple H and Roman Reigns have to team up in order to make sure Lesnar doesn't win the title because he's that dominant, or something to that tune. But you're right. I mean, that is a potential problem. It certainly is, unless Reigns loses and then turns heel,
Right.
and does something at the end of the match to fuck over Dean Ambrose or Brock Lesnar or something like that because he got booed the whole time, and that could be the storyline that they go with, that he's just fed up. He's tired of going against the authority. He's tired of being shit on by the fans. And, he's just going to put himself in the best position to be successful. That's the only thing I can think of.
I agree. I mean, I think it's time to turn Reigns heel. I don't know. It seems like a little convoluted right now because you got to think Lesnar's going to be going into this Wyatt program for WrestleMania, so I'm not sure he's going to be in the world title picture.
Right.
I don't know. They're in a bad spot, and but I have no sympathy for them because they put themselves in this bad spot. And as you mentioned, they're putting on a clinic right now. The WWE creative team is on how to book a guy to not get him over and with Roman Reigns. They've done it for the past year. They just consistently put him in position after position that engenders the opposite reaction from the crowd that they're hoping to get, and then scratch their heads and wonder why it's happening. It's not hard to figure out. I mean, any reasonable fan with half of a brain can see a mile away that if you put Roman Reigns in a match against Brock Lesnar and Dean Ambrose, who are probably the two most over baby, well, they are the two most over baby faces on the roster, he's going to get booed. Because every match, especially a triple threat match, needs at least one heel, and Roman Reigns is going to be it, whether you want him to be or not. So, look, they're in a bad spot right now, but I think the one thing, and I don't know, maybe I'm being naive, but I just can't imagine that WWE would go down the incredibly predictable route of having Reigns win this match clean over these two guys, go to WrestleMania, face Triple H, win clean as a babyface, and get the title back. I mean, that just makes me want to fall asleep right here at my table recording this podcast, just thinking about that being the main event storyline and the finish to the biggest pay-per-view that WWE has ever tried to put on. So I don't know. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, John, if that's what they end up doing, because that seems to be what they've been committed to doing for the past year plus. But that would be such an anticlimactic end to WrestleMania and such a predictable storyline that I hope somebody in the creative team, raises their voice up and says, "Guys, we can't do this because it's going to backfire again on Roman Reigns."
Right. No, you're 100% right. 100% right. And to really quickly to get back to what they could do for Roman Reigns here if they wanted to go an alternate path, they could have Roman Reigns turn heel at the end of this match. He doesn't need to win, but he turns heel somehow, and then you could have the Undertaker come back, and you could have Roman Reigns cut that promo that says I'm sick and tired of everything. I'm aligned with the authority. You could have the Undertaker come back, being the conscience of the WWE, and he could be the one that says, you know what, Roman Reigns, you've made the wrong decision. I'm going to make you pay for doing this. The Undertaker kind of being the standard bearer, the guy that knows right from wrong, at least at this point in his career. That's sort of how he's been billed. So I think if you have a Reigns versus Undertaker match where Reigns is the heel, I think that could work extremely well. And I think it's not that far-fetched to make a compelling storyline between the two if you do, in fact, have Reigns turn heel.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
I would think I would be totally on board, with that decision. I think, John, because that's kind of certainly an outside the box way to look at it. I think that's something that fans probably wouldn't necessarily expect. It would be fresh for Reigns. I think that would get Reigns over. I mean, it wouldn't get Reigns over as the pure babyface they're trying to get him over as right now, but it would certainly get, I think it would get him over with the crowd, which is kind of been unable to do really all the way going back to last year's Royal Rumble.
Right.
So, John, look, I mean, overall, I guess to wrap this up, I give the Royal Rumble an A. I'm going to give the Monday Night Raw after the Royal Rumble a D because just no follow up on what we saw from the Royal Rumble and just a complete missed opportunity, I think, by WWE.
100%. I mean, they did an absolutely horrible job. I'm sorry, I keep saying this, but it's the truth, and I'm extremely frustrated because not only did they not capitalize on the Royal Rumble momentum, but they're not setting themselves up for good television over the next few weeks leading up to Fastlane. There's nothing that I came out of Raw saying, oh man, I can't wait to see what happens next week. We already know the main event of Fastlane. There are three faces, quote unquote, so we're not going to get this incredible dynamic between all of them. It's just going to be like shaking hands, I respect you, blah, blah, blah. They'll probably go that route, which is boring as fuck. So it's a double whammy here. They just did a horrible job all around, and it's extremely disappointing because of how excited we were after the Royal Rumble. And I was saying to you that it's funny, if we had done this podcast yesterday afternoon instead of Tuesday night, this whole episode or WWE segment would have had a completely different feel and narrative to it. But it's a shame that we had to see that dog shit show that kind of brought us back down to earth here. It's really a shame.
Yeah, it was amazing because the Raw leading up to the Royal Rumble was, of course, pretty weak, and then the Royal Rumble was great, and they kind of reverted back to form. So disappointing there. But, John, that will officially end our WWE talk. And, again, keep an eye out on CagesideSeats.com, run by the great Gino Morosco. We'll have a story up soon detailing why Roman Reigns is probably the worst friend that I've ever seen, John, in my entire life. Just constantly screwing over his friends and family. It's amazing. I don't get how WWE doesn't see that. John, and now it's time for probably my personal favorite segment of the week. This is Scumbag of the Week.
Scumbag.
This is where we call out deviants, miscreants, and general bastards from across the globe, including here in the USA, of any color, creed, or religion. It doesn't really matter if you do something terrible to a fellow human being, or yourself, or society for that matter. We will call you out and brand you a douchebag for all to see. John, this one's going to hit a little bit close to home. We've had some pretty big scumbags. Donald Trump's been a scumbag. We've had scumbags from all over the world. We've had multi-billionaires of huge companies be scumbags. We've had professional sports teams and leagues be scumbag. But this one's going to hit home. A scumbag, John, this week, a gentleman by the name of Nate Bergman, who lives in the Hill East neighborhood here in Washington, D.C., where I also reside. So this is courtesy of the Washington Post. And, of course, following up on the blizzard of 2016, John. The story reads the following. Nate Bergman spent 5 hours Sunday digging his car out of the snow, and now he wants to make sure that no snow shoveling moochers take the parking spot. So he did what any friendly neighbor would do. He put up a sign telling people that they could park in the spot if they wanted to, but that if they did, he would dump all the snow that he dug out back into the parking spot and onto their car. His sign says, "You are free to park anywhere you choose without interference. However, please know, if you choose to take this spot, I will spend the same amount of time, energy, and money to place the snow back in its original place around the vehicle." So Mr. Bergman going to great lengths here to defend his parking spot that he spent a few hours digging out on Sunday. So, John, this will be a little bit of a controversial scumbag. Nate Bergman and folks like him, of course, are our scumbag of the week. But this is a debate on social media that we will be weighing in on, and we certainly urge all of our listeners to weigh in on, too. Is this acceptable? This is, of course, John, I know you see this in Philadelphia probably all the time in the city. Typically, a lot of people, from what I've seen, will do the lawn chair routine of clearing out a space and then putting a lawn chair, putting some other object. I've seen a poker table in a spot before here in D.C. So, personally, in my opinion, I don't do this, and I'm kind of not okay with it. I think that doing a good deed for your fellow man will eventually come back around to you, and that there's certain, some sort of neighborly value to clearing out parking spaces. Because look, if you're out driving around and you need somewhere to park, you might want to take a spot that someone else has taken the time to shovel out and to clear for someone else to come park in. So then you can't come back and blame someone for taking the spot that you cleared out. So to me, this is a scumbag move. It's a little bit. It's a bad look as far as I'm concerned. It says something to me about someone's personality that they have that much anger inside of them that they can't stand to actually do something for someone else. It's got to be just for them, and it strikes me as a little bit selfish. So yes, John, for me, Nate Bergman is the scumbag of the week. Do you agree with this, and do you see this phenomenon around the great city of Philadelphia?
Of course I fucking agree with this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been our scumbag of the week. That's for damn sure, Ben. Look, you can't claim a parking spot on the street, okay? It's that simple. You don't own that space. So you can't hijack it.
The reason that you're having to shovel out your car in the first place is because you chose voluntarily to park your car on the street and not move it when the blizzard was looming.
Exactly. You can't hijack a parking spot on the street like a total fucking scumbag, Ben. This guy isn't more important than anyone else on his street. So why does he think that he gets to claim it? Like, I don't give a shit if you spent 24 hours digging your car out. So did everyone else. So you aren't fucking special, and it didn't just snow on your car. Okay, so this is totally narcissistic and embarrassing. And the fact that this guy went through the trouble of making a fucking sign shows that he has horrific judgment, just like every other scumbag of the week that we have featured on the Guilty Pleasures podcast, Ben. And really quickly, this shit goes on all the time in Philadelphia during snowstorms. I know you said it, that it happens in DC. People strategically put trash cans, parking cones, chairs, crates, and anything else you can possibly think of to reserve.
I saw an ironing board one time in DC.
Ironing board. Anything you can possibly think of to reserve that spot that they just pull out of. But you can't fucking do that. And Ben, I'll tell you what. The next time I see one of these things, Ben, I'm going to park in that space and then put whatever they were using to reserve it on the top of my car. Basically letting that person know that I don't give a shit about your imaginary reserved parking spot.
Yeah. Look, I mean, to me, for this guy, for probably millions of other people here in the East Coast this past weekend with the storm that we had, there just seems to be nobody's capable of just doing something nice for their community and for their fellow man. Look, you shovel your car out, you left it there, you had to do it, okay? Somebody else is going to take advantage of that parking spot, and that's just the way society works, especially if you're in a big city. So, and again, what goes around comes around. I'm sure that this guy, look, we have more than 3 feet of fucking snow here in DC. It's not going away anytime soon. I'm sure this guy's going to have to be driving around the city looking for parking spaces, and God knows one of the parking spaces he takes is probably going to be one that somebody else spent a few hours shoveling out. So, to this guy, look, I understand it's a lot of hard work. It sucks. We're all trying to make it through the blizzard of 2016 as best we can, but you are a huge scumbag.
Huge fucking scumbag. And Ben, it's not like he went out and he shoveled other people's cars out of their spots. So you know, I know what you're saying, but I don't agree that he's doing something nice for someone else if they come in and take his spot. It's not like he's purposely doing something nice for somebody else.
Well, no, he's going out of his way to not do something nice for someone else.
Right, exactly. And it's not like, yeah, he's not helping his neighbors by any stretch, like helping them get their cars out. If that was the case, then I'd say, okay, the guy just put in a shitload of work for other people. He at least wants to keep his spot. I mean, I still don't agree with it, but then you're like, all right, well, at least he did something decent. But this was all about him, completely selfish, complete lack of character and judgment and decision making. This guy is a huge scumbag, and Ben, he wants the world to know that he's a huge fucking scumbag. He doesn't give a shit. He advertised it for everyone to see on a sign, and it sounded like he wrote 3 fucking paragraphs on this sign, so it must have been fucking huge and taken him a lot of time. So, you know what? Fuck this guy. And if he's listening to this podcast, please get your ass on here so we can fucking put you down to where you belong. This is fucking sad. Reach out to us at the GP Podcast. And to all of our listeners, of course, if you feel differently, than Ben and I, which I don't fucking get it if you do. But if you do, please be sure to tweet us at the GP Podcast, hashtag the Guilty Pleasures Podcast, and let us know why we're wrong and why you think it's okay to reserve a spot on the street that isn't yours.
Yeah, I mean, look, I might have to. This should be a little bit easier than most times to get a scumbag potentially on the air. Mr. Nate Bourbon does not live all that particularly far from me, and he's ignited quite the Twitter war here in Washington, D.C. So I will certainly reach out and see if we can get him on the air for a spirited debate on the merits of saving parking spaces, John.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic audio, man. We get him on next week. We're going to get on that for you, the listeners, because we care about you guys. We want this show to be the best possible show it can be. That's fucking what's best for business right there, Ben.
We will settle this debate next week on the Guilty Pleasures Podcast.
Damn right. We absolutely will. That was a fantastic Scumbag of the Week, Ben. But moving on to one of our other favorite segments. This is called Swipe Right, Swipe Left. And we pose 5 quick hit statements. And we either swipe right if we agree with that statement, or we swipe left if we disagree with that statement. And these statements can be about anything and everything going on in the world, Ben, in any genre. That's for damn sure.
And they are.
Yes, they are. So, Ben, the first one here, and this is going back to the WWE, which we featured heavily earlier in the show. Moving Jerry Lawler, the King, off of the pay-per-view announce desk, an announce team, was the right call, Ben. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm swiping right, 100%. I think taking the King off of pay-per-view announcing was the right move. I think taking him off of Raw, a year or so ago, maybe not even a year, whenever that was the right move. Look, the King, God bless him. He was fantastic in the Attitude Era. He was fantastic in the post-Attitude Era, but he's kind of lost his step. Now, he's getting it back a little bit on SmackDown by going back to his original heel character. So I will say that he's kind of going back to the old Jerry Lawler that we know and love, and that's how I think he's most effective. So God knows, there might still be some hope for him. But I'm content with having Byron Saxton as his replacement. I think even if it's just temporary to give him a break, right move, I'm swiping right.
I'm swiping right as well. Simply because Jerry Lawler has now become the heel announcer on SmackDown. So you can't have 2 heel announcers and no face announcers on the show. It's just that simple. And JBL is firmly planted right now as the top heel announcer, whether you and I agree with that or not, in WWE. So Jerry Lawler just doesn't have a spot available. And I think it just comes down to logistics. It comes down to that. So for that reason, I'm swiping right as well.
Yeah, he's not comfortable as a babyface on the announce desk. You can tell that for sure. He never has been.
You're right, so. and I agree with you. He is so much better as a heel.
No question. So moving back to the snowstorm, John. Here's an interesting one that I think will tell us something about our character and our disposition. The statement is this: you wait until the last minute to grocery shop before a snowstorm. John, I'm swiping left here. I did my grocery shopping last Wednesday and Thursday before the storm hit in Washington on Friday afternoon because I realized the stores would be a complete train wreck. Now, I will say this, not to give myself too much credit, I did wait until the last minute to make my run to the liquor store where I promptly emerged with a bottle of Maker's Mark, a box of wine, and a 12-pack of craft beer. The problem is it took me about 30 to 35 minutes to get into the liquor store and get out because the line was literally wrapped around the entire store twice. And there seemed to be more people in the liquor store than there were in the grocery store in my area here around Washington, D.C., which is interesting in and of itself. But as far as getting food and being prepared to eat when I was stuck inside my apartment for 72 hours, I did that early. So no, I did not wait until the last minute. I'm swiping left.
So, to me, this isn't a black and white question, Ben. So, I'm going to swipe right here.
Okay.
Not because it's the right decision, but just because I did it on Friday. Okay? Look, I don't buy into the whole, crazy hype that the news feeds us about how bad the storms are going to be, because a lot of times they're wrong. And
this time they were right, though.
No, they were right this time, but a lot of times they're wrong and they do that on purpose. So I never specifically make a trip to the grocery store because of a snowstorm. Okay, but it just so happened that I needed to do my normal grocery shopping on a Friday, which was this past Friday. Okay, so overall, I don't really have a solid answer here, Ben, but I'll swipe right because that's what I did this past weekend.
And that was why I came up with the question, of course.
Yeah, and yeah, of course. And you know what? I should be applauded for my fucking honesty here, Ben. We are
That's
not
true.
perfect, but we're damn close. Moving on to statement number 3 for episode 27 of the Guilty Pleasures podcast. The statement reads this: the Cleveland Cavaliers were right to fire David Blatt, who was their head coach. Ben, I'm going to swipe right here. Look, LeBron James and the rest of the players seem to have a better relationship with Tyronn Lue, who is their new head coach. And it seemed that David Blatt was set up to fail from the beginning if the Cavs didn't win a title last year and dominate the regular season. I absolutely think he should be an assistant coach elsewhere, or maybe even a head coach, but not for a high-profile team that has sky-high expectations. This was his first coaching job in the United States, Ben. So he should learn the nuances of the NBA game somewhere else, and then maybe get another opportunity down the line for a team that is a contender, even if it's as an assistant coach or something like that. And one thing to note here, Ben, that kind of validates my position and opinion is that the Brooklyn Nets are currently looking to potentially hire David Blatt as their next head coach, according to a couple reports. So it seems like he's doing what I'm recommending that he does, and that's go to a team that is horrible. The Nets are absolutely pathetic right now, and kind of get his legs under him in terms of the NBA game, have a little bit of success, and then go back to a contender. So I am going to swipe right.
Look, I'm swiping right here, 1,000%. I'm surprised that he actually lasted after last year. I thought he might be fired in the offseason. It seemed like LeBron James didn't have a lot of faith in this guy, and by all accounts, LeBron James essentially was coaching the team to begin with, along with Tyronn Lue for most of last year. So I'm not sure David Blatt really was the coach of the team in anything other than name only. But look, they're still the best team in the Eastern Conference. There's no doubt about that. There's not a lot of competition there at this point. But look, I mean, the guy has been, not only did they get absolutely trucked at home by the Golden State Warriors, which is just embarrassing, just absolutely blown out of the gym. But look, Blatt has been unable, for whatever reason, to find a way to integrate James, Irving, and Kevin Love into the lineup. And Kevin Love clearly is frustrated. There's been rumblings about him being traded before the trading deadline. So this guy, for the roster, he's just the wrong fit for this team. As you said, he's the wrong fit to coach a guy like a LeBron James. He's the wrong guy to coach a team that has this mix of talent. So it'll remain to be seen if Lue is the guy who can get the best out of the so-called Big Three in Cleveland at this point. But David Blatt, I think the writing was on the wall a long time ago, even before the season started. So for that reason, John, I'm absolutely going to swipe right.
Ben, two of the most important things when you're coaching in the NBA, especially these days, because it's only a team of 12 players, and there are a lot of superstars in the league, and a big pay gap between the stars and the minimum players. It's that you have to be able to relate to your players, and you have to be able to get the respect of your players. And those are two important things that are even more important in the NBA than other sports. And Tyronn Lue played in the NBA for many seasons, so he has the respect of the players for that reason. David Blatt has never coached or really done anything head coach-wise in the United States. So the players weren't that familiar with him. Let's face it. I mean, this might have something. He's a white male, middle-aged to upper-age male. Tyronn Lue is an African-American player. Most of the players on the team are African-American. I think it's just easier for him to relate to them. And like I said, they respect him for things that he's done in the league. So for a team like this that has a lot of veterans, and like you said, LeBron James, who calls a lot of the plays himself, he kind of takes over. I think maybe even more for this team than any, the ability to relate and the ability to respect your coach is more important. That's why I think Tyronn Lue will be the better fit.
I think so. So jumping around here, we're going to go from the NBA back to internet dating, which has always been one of our favorite topics here on the Guilty Pleasures podcast. John, this is certainly kind of an old school question here. The statement is this: in the age of internet dating, it's still cool to drive to a woman's house and pick her up for a first date. John, I'm swiping left here. I understand the appeal. I certainly try to consider myself a gentleman in many respects.
Oh, such a gentleman.
Something, of course. And there's something gentlemanly about driving to a woman's house and picking her up for a date. And certainly if you've been dating for a little while, this is an acceptable thing to do. But I think the old days of picking a woman up and going to meet her father or whatever at the front door for a first date, those days are past for several reasons, not the least of which, as we've talked about again many times in this show, a lot of people who are getting together these days in 2016 meet on the internet or meet on Tinder or meet on some other app or dating website. And so, if you're a woman or if you're a man, quite frankly, on both sides of this equation, I think you want to meet somewhere public to make sure the guy isn't a serial rapist or a complete asshole. Right. So you don't necessarily want to give somebody your address right off the bat. So that kind of makes things a little bit different than perhaps, even 10 years ago, 15, certainly 25, 30 years ago, when you pretty much had to meet someone, either you were introduced or you met at a bar or you met somewhere else, so you were able to determine kind of off the bat whether or not they were a threat to you and your physical safety. So for that reason, I don't really think it's cool anymore. In fact, I think if a woman said that she wanted to come pick me up at my apartment for a first date and I'd never met her before in person, that would freak me the fuck out, and I would say no and cancel the date immediately. So, John, I'm swiping left. I don't think it's cool to do that in a first date in 2016.
I completely agree with you. I am swiping left, and I do want to say, like you did, that this goes both ways. Okay,
sure.
We are two men, so we're saying women in this case, but it certainly is the opposite way as well. I do want to say that. Most women just aren't comfortable being in a one-on-one situation with someone they just met on the internet for their first interaction. Okay, most first dates happen in a public place. So I just, I don't think it's the right move to do. I mean, it can't hurt to ask, Ben. That's for sure. It can't hurt. And I think that can come off as you being considerate and gentleman.
Sure.
Which is always a good thing to convey to a woman, when you're first meeting them and in the first couple of dates. But most women wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, at least in my experience. So I'm swiping left. And one other thing to add here is that, a lot of people have heard horror stories about things that have happened from online dating. Sure. And I think because of that as well, it makes it even worse and less likely that a woman or a man would be cool with this happening. I don't know, maybe in the beginning of internet dating, it was a little bit different, but now that there's been so many experiences on the internet that people can look up and have heard about, I think this is going to be a lost thing for sure, Ben. I'm swiping left.
Look, and to all the men out there, if you do bring this up and if you offer to pick up a woman for the first date, just tread carefully. Don't come out of the box and say, "What's your address? I'll pick you up at 8." Try to be a little more diplomatic and ease into the situation there, I think, John.
Yeah, that's a great call. Good life advice there, Ben. Moving on to the fifth and final swipe right, swipe left statement. The statement is this, and going back to the WWE here, AJ Styles, who had an amazing debut in the Royal Rumble, and then on Monday Night Raw, will hold the WWE Championship sometime between now and WrestleMania 33, which is next year, man. Look, I'm going to swipe left here. Unfortunately, I believe Vince McMahon's ego will prevent AJ Styles from becoming World Heavyweight Champion within the next year. He seems to have something against guys coming from other companies being pushed very hard, and it's a damn fucking shame. AJ Styles certainly has the ability to thrive in that role, and I wish they would put the belt on him and cement him in the main event picture, but I just don't see Vinnie Mac letting that happen, which is a damn shame, of course, but I'm swiping left here.
Man, it pains me a little bit here, John, because I've loved AJ Styles for a long time, and it was certainly exciting to see him at the Royal Rumble, and I thought his match against Chris Jericho on Monday was pretty damn good. But I got to swipe left here, and it's just for the reason that you said. I think Vince McMahon And we've seen this over and over again with a number of indie stars. We saw it most recently probably with Sting, that Vince McMahon held a grudge against Sting and brought him in 2 matches to lose. Because he's still holding a grudge and wants to remind everybody that he won the Monday Night War over WCW. So he's got a long memory, and WWE, Vince included, especially Vince, seemed to have a problem with guys who made it elsewhere, made a name for themselves, made a living elsewhere in the wrestling business outside of WWE. So look, I mean, AJ Styles certainly could become a world champion. He's already over as fuck, which is pretty impressive after just 2 appearances with the company. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a top of the card main event level guy. But look, they're not. I think there would be a locker room revolt probably in WWE if they put the belt on him that fast. So I don't see it happening over the next 14 months, John. So I'm swiping left.
Agreed. It's a damn shame too.
It is a damn shame. It's a damn shame. Now, briefly here, John, just a couple minutes left in the podcast today, but we're going to move into our NFL segment, which we're going to keep extremely brief this week because, of course, we are now looking at the Super Bowl in a little under 2 weeks, 12 days from now, as we record this podcast. So we will do our full Super Bowl prediction, breakdown of the game, our picks, just basically a Super Bowl heavy episode next week on the Guilty Pleasures podcast, breaking down the Denver Broncos versus the Carolina Panthers. But just a couple of things coming out of the AFC and NFC championship games, John, that I just want to touch on briefly, and then I'll kick it over to you. Number one in the NFC championship game is, holy fuck, the Panthers look like an absolute wrecking crew. I did not see that coming. I picked the Cardinals in this game. I thought they were a more complete team. I thought even as good as the Panthers' offenses looked, I thought the Cardinals' offense was more explosive. I put more faith in Carson Palmer than Cam Newton, which was the wrong move. Carson Palmer, for the second playoff game in a row, really just fell on his face. 7 turnovers for Arizona. So Carson Palmer, I love the guy, but man, it's starting to look like he just can't get it done when it counts the most, whereas Carolina looks like absolute world beaters right now. And spoiler alert as far as my pick, but I think they could truck Denver in the Super Bowl just based on what I've seen from them in the playoffs the past couple weeks. And John, the main thing that I want to touch on here, and that's the AFC Championship game, of course, the Broncos going over the Patriots, winning by 2 points in Denver. Look, this to me, Peyton Manning looked pretty good. He had some nice throws. He certainly didn't look amazing. I don't think we really expected him to. The defense did look amazing. They harassed Tom Brady all day long, knocked him on his ass more than I've seen in years, quite frankly. But the loss came down, John, in my opinion, to 2 people. Stephen Gostkowski, the kicker, who missed an extra point early in the game, which was huge, and came back to bite the Patriots, and also on Bill Belichick for late in the game, about 6 minutes left, going for it on 4th down rather than kicking a field goal. That, of course, also came back to bite New England. So, look, I give a lot of credit to Denver. Their defense was amazing, but I think they got a couple of lucky breaks here with some errant kicks from one of the best kickers, if not the best kicker in the league, and some bad coaching decisions from probably the best coach in the league. So what are your thoughts coming out of both of those games? And then we'll save most of our Super Bowl breakdown for next week.
All right, well, I'll respond to the Patriots and Bill Belichick here because you just talked about that. Look, I mean, going for it when down 8 with pretty much half the 4th quarter left, it wasn't the right decision.
No.
But Ben, of course, hindsight is 50-50. And Bill Belichick is known for being aggressive in these types of situations. But look, his defense was playing very well. So I don't think he needed to go for it in that situation. But look, he's such a fantastic coach, and he has such an amazing track record that I have to give him the benefit of the doubt here. At least for the most part. And it also helps when you have Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, and Rob Gronkowski. So I can't fault him too much, thinking that those guys who are so incredible might be able to get it done, especially in the clutch, which they've done so many times. But yeah, I mean, and that sort of isn't a black and white situation either. But if I'm forced to give a black and white answer, I'd say he made the wrong decision, and it certainly ended up hurting them for the reasons that you said. But it was a competitive game. I think everyone thought the Patriots were going to win, and handedly for the most part. So it was a little bit of a shock to see Denver end up pulling this game out. But I mean, give some credit to Peyton Manning, and like you said, I mean, the Denver defense is just special, and I'm really excited to see Cam Newton versus the Denver defense in the Super Bowl, because Cam Newton right now is playing like the best quarterback in football, and the Denver Broncos have the best defense in football. So, you know what, Ben? This reminds me a little bit of the Super Bowl a couple years ago when it was the Broncos versus the Seahawks. This time the roles being reversed. Denver is now not the offensive powerhouse, they're the defensive powerhouse like the Seahawks were. And the Panthers are the offensive powerhouse, at least it seems in these playoffs.
Well, their defense is pretty damn good as well.
It is. It absolutely is. So I think this is going to be a really interesting game. And like you said, we'll get into the preview next week for that. But my God, they just dominated the Arizona Cardinals. And that second half against Seattle, I don't really count that, because Carolina was up so many points in that game that, they were playing just not to lose. It doesn't matter if you win a playoff game by 3 points or 30. So they were letting the Seahawks score, I feel like, just to keep the game. But as long as they were winning, they were fine with it. So I don't really count that. But the bottom line is that the Panthers have dominated in the three halves of football in the playoffs where they've been going full throttle. I mean, think about it. They crushed the Seahawks in the first half, and they crushed the Cardinals in the entire game. So, I mean, they look fucking unstoppable right now. And I'm really curious to see what the spread is going to be next week. I have a feeling that Carolina is going to be favored by a decent amount in this game.
Yeah.
But all the props in the world to Cam Newton. This guy gets a bad rap. We've talked about this before. It's unfair. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he is a brash, confident, cocky, good-looking, successful African-American in a position that has been dominated by Caucasians for most of time. And I think a lot of it has to do with men just being jealous of him and feeling threatened by Cam Newton. Because, like I said, he has all these things going for him, and they see him being brash and arrogant and borderline cocky, even though he deserves it. And I think people feel threatened and are a little taken back by that. So I think the only way that people know how to react is to hate him. You fear what you don't understand. That type of dynamic. So I think it's totally unfair to Cam Newton. He deserves all the credit in the world. He is the runaway MVP, Ben. There's just no question about it. This guy is out of this world, and I'm so happy for him, because I'm a Cam Newton fan, and I'm really happy for him, and I'm just really fucking pumped for this Super Bowl. I'm pretty excited for it. And if you had told me it would be the Broncos and the Panthers in the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have been that excited for the game at all.
No.
But it has turned into that. So I'm certainly looking forward to it. And Ben, really quickly, before we move on to the last segment, we are going to have a football-heavy episode next week. And I think, if you agree, we should go over a list of prop bets for the Super Bowl and give our thoughts on those bets and tell you guys, the listeners, what you should bet to make a lot of money along with the game itself. So you have more than one option of things that you can bet, and I think it'd be a lot of fun for us. What do you say?
I totally agree with that, and I do expect there to be a prop bet on the over-under on the number of times the coin flips during the opening coin toss, given what we saw in the Arizona-Green Bay. Early line, by the way, is Carolina favored by 4.5, which seems about right to me.
It does.
We'll see how much that moves between now and game day. But John, why don't you move us into our last and another one of our favorite segments here in the show?
This is the last segment, ladies and gentlemen. It is called Last Call Life Advice. And this is how this segment came about. It's very simple. Ben and I love to drink. We love to party. We love to go out. We love to interact with other human beings, especially when we're drunk. And people have always seemed to really open up to us and tell us their life stories and their problems and things like that. So Ben and I have been in positions where we've had to give life advice to other people. And, we might not be qualified to do that, but we have done it nonetheless, and we think that people are better off for it. So we have decided to take that and bring it to the podcast to give you, the listeners, some weekly advice to become better human beings. So, Ben, why don't you start us off with your last call life advice for episode 27?
Absolutely. And as is the case usually, all good advice is direct and blunt and to the point and very simple. And mine is that sometimes you need to learn or need to practice how to listen and not talk, especially if someone, a friend or a loved one, is confiding in you about something. Look, there's nothing wrong. Sometimes you look at it as a negative in your own life if you don't know what to say, or if you don't know what to respond or how to respond, or if you don't have an answer. If a friend or a partner or a family member is going through a tough time, sometimes you feel like you need to say something and you feel bad about yourself because you don't know what to say or how to make them feel better. Sometimes it's fine just to listen, and that's exactly what the other person needs, as well as if you're learning something at work, or even if you're just hanging out with people. Sometimes being able to listen, A, it's how you learn more, and B, it just makes you come across as more of a thoughtful and attentive and just generally good person rather than somebody out there. Because you can tell, John, I'm sure you can, when you're talking to someone and they're not really listening to what you're saying, they're playing out in their head what they're going to say next.
Just like I'm doing right now.
Exactly. Right. I can spot that a mile away. But that's kind of an annoying thing if you're talking to someone, and it sort of lowers my opinion, not you, of course, but lowers my opinion of that person because they don't come across as considerate enough to actually pay attention to what I'm saying. So don't be that person. Listen whether somebody needs advice or they need help or they just need an ear, or if they can teach you something. Learn to listen instead of talking. God knows John and I are pretty good at talking, but we both know how to listen as well, and that can really help you out in a lot of different areas in life.
That is unbelievable last call life advice, Ben. Honestly, that might be one of the best ones you've ever done, because listening in this day and age in our society has become a lost art.
Oh, yeah.
It really has. And I pride myself on being a good listener. And I got to be honest, women I've met, people I've met, friends, coworkers, a lot of them struggle to listen. Everyone thinks they know everything. And everyone is so consumed with their own shit that they don't feel like they have the time to be empathetic to someone or to deal with someone else's problems. And that's just a fucking shame.
It is.
So, fantastic life advice, man. I mean, mine pales in
comparison. And don't be on
comparison.
your phone if you're out there listening to someone talk as well. Just give them your full attention, please.
Yeah, that's fucking rude. That is absolutely rude. Ben, my last call life advice this week, it's pretty blunt as well, and simple, and pretty obvious, but it's to be punctual or be early for everything you do in life. Now, Ben and I have an inside joke here that we're not going to share, Ben. But anyway, so for all of our listeners that know me, this is certainly something I can work on, and I am trying to, by the way, but it really is incredibly important. If you are late to anything, it is a sign of disrespect. And whether you like it or not, our society puts a ton of importance on this. So whether it's a first date or an interview or anything like that, make sure to be there on time or a little bit early, because it shows that you give a damn, it shows that you are organized, and it shows that you're responsible. So, Ben, my last call life advice this week, be on time or a little bit early for everything that you do.
Now that is damn good advice.
It is. Thank you for that, my friend. So, that about wraps it up for episode 27 of the Guilty Pleasures podcast. We want to thank all of our listeners, all of our watchers for tuning in here. We had a great episode. We had a lot of fun, as always. Reviewed the Royal Rumble, which was fantastic. Reviewed Raw, which fucking sucked. And all of our segments that always kick ass. So thank you once again to all of our listeners and viewers on YouTube. There are numerous ways, Ben, that people can reach out to us now. So please, tweet us on Twitter at the GP Podcast. Visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/the GP Podcast. Find us on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on SoundCloud. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. And you can email us, theguiltypleasurespodcast@gmail.com. So we are pretty much on every fucking medium possible. There is zero excuse for you not to interact with the show and have a good time, make the show better, and tell us what we're doing extremely well, and Tell us maybe some things we can work on, but I doubt there's fucking anything. But Ben, we will be sure to listen with our undivided attention.
We absolutely will not dismiss it, no matter how wrong you might be about what you think we can improve on. We'll give you 100% of our attention.
Absolutely. So everyone, thank you so much once again for tuning in. Have a great week.
Take care, everybody.